And I was depressed not because of the dying or the stroke, but because of I had up and then till then I felt I had a graced life.
Mm.
I had the hands of Maharaji. Before I'm going to have, he'll take care of me.
Mm.
And so I said in the hospital room, they put a picture of Maharaji, and I said to him, where were you when I stroked? You going up to lunch or something? And I started to lose my faith.
Mm.
And that loss of faith depressed me. That was the depression. That was the depression. And the stroke, I don't know whether you had this, but the stroke, I said to Maharaji, would you still grace me?
Mm.
And he says, I'm gracing you.
Mm.
And then I started to see the stroke as grace.
Mm.
And for example, I couldn't talk. Well, that was a graceful thing. But then another thing is like I had a book called How Can I Help? One of my books, and that was before the stroke. And now I'd write the book, How Can You Help Me? So how I wanted to see if me dependent, I've never had that exploring. I was exploring dependency on the people. And you know, if I was in the wheelchair and I come to a street crossing, waiting there, and a couple would come along and here, we'll help you. And they were so happy doing it, and I was happy having them. And it was such a beautiful, a joyful interaction. Mm. And I realized this dependency was not black as you know.
So there's something about loving awareness and that timeless knowing, and yet also our humanity, that we have a body and an ego or a sense of separation, and we're dependent when we're little. Everybody's dependent, and we go through a cycle where we're somewhat independent, but I think it's more a fiction in our culture than the truth. We're actually interdependent, and then we become more dependent mostly. And we have a culture that doesn't like dependence. You know, you're supposed to be independent, rather than knowing that you're interdependent and that you're part of the whole.
That's good. That's good, Jack.
And somehow to quiet the mind and come back to loving awareness, you can feel that interdependence. And for me anyway, it also includes humanity. Oscar Wilde had that phrase, he called it the tainted glory of humanity.
Yeah.
That somehow there will be fear and there will be joy and there'll be all these things that make human incarnation. And somehow to learn to bow to that. You call it grace, and I think in the monastery where I practice, we just learn to bow to everything. You bow to your suffering, and you bow to your joy, and you bow to death, and bow to birth, and all of that is taken as part of the unfolding of what's holy, of life.
I looked at it another way. We humans are, we function on two planes of consciousness. And one plane will be the ego and dying and physical things. And the other plane will be the nothingness, or what are you, the Buddha nature, or things like that. And I say, I've seen that I want to counsel people of balancing those things. Because people that are so, wow, so I gotta go and get God, and they don't pay their taxes, or people that pay their taxes and don't bother with God.
Yes. Yeah. So we have this dance of these like the double helix in the DNA of the human personal incarnation and the eternal and the timeless. And I remember Ajahn Chah, when he went to his teacher, he'd practiced as a monk for a number of years and doing these wild austerities in the caves and the jungles, and had all these samadhi experiences and visions and all kinds of things. And he went to see this great meditation master and told him all about that. The master shook his head and said, "You've missed the point." He said, "Well, what do you mean I've missed it? I did all this work." He said, no, you have to turn and ask yourself, to whom is this happening? Who is the witness of all this? Just as you're saying. And instead of caring whether it's joyful or painful or sad or frightening or delicious, become the one who knows. That was his phrase. Become the one who knows. Become the knowing, and then the freedom of the Buddha will be yours in some way. So this is, but then the interesting thing, and it's really so much connected with what you're saying, is that when Ajahn Chah created this monastery, there was this great sense of freedom, like